Your name?
No.
I
can't. Yeah, I can't put my stuff on it. Like, I feel dirty, man. Like having that. Like, yeah, man. Like, I don't want. I'm like, God, man. Like a little bit. I don't want to doubt anyone's class, man. But it's so easy. Just make up an institute and just put it under your name. You know what I mean? Or make a school and just put it under your name. Even if you're the only teacher, like it looks better. Man. I mean, to me anyway. That's because I was always trying to figure. A lot of people when they talk to me, they're like, okay, developing like brand awareness and I'm like, man, that doesn't feel right.
Yeah, it's true.
And, like I understand what they're saying, and I understand, I mean, like they mean well, and they're like, well, if you have something to offer, and and you want people to be aware. I was like, but I don't want people to be connected to me. You know what I mean? I want them to be connected to knowledge. Yeah.
Baba. Oh my God.
But anyway, we'll talk, inshallah. Allah yabarak. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tazkīyah. Yeah.
You need the remote?
I have it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Why did they turn it off? The problem is the office is locked. So, but inshallah from next week. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So inshallah, until the TVs get turned on, I guess I wanted to ask, because the time is going to change in the coming weeks. So do you guys want to keep the class linked to timings, or do you want to link it to the salawat? You want to move it to the salat? So Maghrib is going to come in anywhere between from 7 until June. It'll be from 7:15 to 8. And then Iḥyā will be at like really late. So you guys want to move the class later, or what? Because right now, so you want to do, so right now it'll be from like 6:30 until 7:30, or like it'll be from 6:30 until Maghrib, and that's how it'll be, and then we can have class after Maghrib, or we can just keep it as is. Or I've heard of it, honestly, but it's up to you. I'm fine either way. Yeah, earlier? Okay, yeah.
No, not earlier than 30.
It'll be 6:30. It's never going to be earlier than 6:30. Does it make a difference?
I don't want it to go like like a class.
Yeah. Can we can I do a survey? Can I just Can I just share a survey online? If you guys aren't part of the WhatsApp group, just talk to Ramsha and she'll add you to the group, inshallah. And TVs are on. So today, inshallah, last time we had started talking about backbiting, right? And the problem with backbiting, and obviously all of us understand it and understand the problems that are related to it. Today we're going to talk a little bit, inshallah, the definition of backbiting, what it actually is, because it's not possible to understand something without defining it first. And this is something that's really fundamental. It's really important. You'll find out when you're discussing anything and everything, one of the most important things that you can do is to define it. There are two ways of doing this. So you have the logicians, the people who specialize in logic and mantiq. They say that there are two ways to define something. One way is to discuss the boundaries of it, and one way is to describe it. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just two ways. Why? Because people perceive things differently, and it kind of helps them digest and understand these concepts and these ideas better. So here to mention about your brother, about what he dislikes, even if it reaches him. And that description can be physical, his lineage, manners, actions, statements, religion, his worldly status, in terms of what he wears, in terms of his home, in terms of what kind of car he drives, right? Any questions on any of these? I think this stuff is pretty straightforward. No, is any of these that you guys don't feel is fair or should not be part of backbiting? No, all of them fall into the category. So we'll break down each one of these and we'll talk about examples of them and the ones that Ghazāli actually mentions. So over here, he mentions even saying about someone he has watery or discolored eyes, baldness, pause, right? And height, short or tall, complexion, dark or light, or any description that he might dislike. So over here, these are all different descriptions of the person. If you look at them objectively, right? If you just look at them like this, are any of these, I don't want to say negative, but because some of them can be factual, right? So where is the negativity here, or where is the problem in these descriptions? Or there isn't one? Okay, intention I think is really important. I saw somebody's hand. Yes. Okay, yes. A context, sure. So I think all of these are three very important points. And when we talk about the situations where riba or backbiting is actually permissible, all of these will come into play, right? What was the intention of that person? Does this person dislike that characteristic about himself? What is the context in these things that are being discussed? And these are very good introductions into when we talk about those particular situations. But in and of themselves, they're just descriptions, right? They're general descriptions. There's nothing particularly negative per se in any of these descriptions. They might just be factual about that person. Ethnicity. So talking about saying his father is Nabatean or Indian. Now, this is in the context of Ghazāli, right? So this is during Ghazāli's time. Over here, what is the context or what is the discussion? And what is, what kind of parallel would we draw today? I'm sorry? This is very clearly racism, right? This is racism. And when we say racism, what do we mean? Pointing out somebody's of a different ethnicity, is that racism? No. Okay. Okay. Yes. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that if we associate stereotypical traits with that particular ethnicity, am I hearing that correctly? Are particular ethnicities or cultures, do they excel at some things more than others? Or do you think, are all people the same? Right, people aren't the same. People are definitely different. So the question then comes in, if the highlight is there, that a particular community is better at something. Like for example, the Somali community is well known for having a higher percentage of what? Ahafat. Is that racism? Huh? Depends on my intention. I'm just like, you know what I mean? No, but I'm saying, I'm just describing, it can apply to any of these things. But over here, if we understand, or if I'm making the statement saying, okay, there's in this particular community, there's a higher propensity of X, Y, Z. Yes, you're going to say something about that? Sure. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So over here, when we talk about negativity, negativity is going to be what? Is it absolute? Is it objective? Clarity is also subjective. What do you, okay, sure. It depends. Depends on what? How do I determine if something is negative or not? We are within the context of backbiting. And remember, backbiting is, okay, who determines if they are backbitten? The backbiter, right? Was that or the backbiter, backbitten? The victim, all right. And the other person, the beneficiary, or how does that work?
Whatever.
All right, sure. Let's use victim and beneficiary. So here, who determines if they are, or if they are a victim of being backbitten? Right, the victim themselves, right? So they're the ones that determine you are backbiting about me. I'm sorry? Okay, so here, intention is something that I want to touch on and that we'll definitely talk about. Me as somebody who is talking about someone else, and if my intention was not to backbite that person, And we'll talk about the importance of that. Does it constitute backbiting or not? It's a valid question, and it's something that we will discuss and we'll get into. I'm sorry?
Can you say that there's like a general reasonable standard of what's considered backbiting? Because a lot of times the victim might not hear about it. We're not there to say, oh, you backbit me.
Okay.
So if you're talking about somebody you're not around,
What if,
saying that you can't determine whether you're backbiting the person or not.
so what if I'm backbiting Abraham Lincoln? Do I need to worry about his time period in context? A living person. Okay, so over here, because the thing is, when you backbite someone, the essence of it is that person is what? Is he present? Is he listening? No, right? It's behind his back. So that person is almost like, even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he likens that person to someone who is what? Not just eating the flesh of his brother, eating the flesh of his dead brother, right? So that likeness is already there and it's in place. But like I said, I guess the point I'm trying to get across is there has to be an objective way of determining negativity. And I think one of those ways you guys really mentioned was, yes. Okay, so if a person can hear me. So if a person is next to me and I call them an idiot, it's not backbiting, but it's what? It's slander, right? so you went from like bad words. It's like, at least I didn't backbite. No, like, okay, yeah, all you did was like slander and libel this person. Like, so that doesn't make it. It doesn't make it any better. It just makes it not backbiting. Huh?
What if it's clinically dead?
Huh?
Clinically dead.
Oh, if he's clinically dead, like a vegetable? Yeah. Or clinically insane. I mean, again, I think one thing that you guys presented, which I think is very reasonable, is that if he or she determines that to be backbiting, right? That's something that's really important. Like, what if you have someone who is extremely sensitive and considers everything backbiting? What happens then? Right, just don't even talk about that. So what do you think is going to happen to the people around this person? Right, people are going to start distancing themselves. Because if I'm not talking about someone, which is good, like we shouldn't be talking about people in general, but I'm saying this person who's constantly sensitive, what happens with the people around them? They don't want to, like, if they don't want to be around them. So we as a culture kind of have to develop that tolerance too. And I know that I'm not here like, yeah, it's like, no, promoting, bullies are awesome and we need them. No, that's not the point. The point is that there has to be a little level of thick-skinnedness that we all have. And the reason for that is that's what helps us develop tolerance for people who have ideas that are different than ours. Otherwise, if we don't allow to have that space where people differ with those ideas, we're never going to be challenged as people. If I'm always surrounding myself with people who are clapping for me, those aren't my friends. Those are what? They're just cheerleaders, right? They're just cheerleaders, and they're not looking for my success. They're not. They're clapping for me because they're expecting me to what? To clap for them, right? When it's there, when they say something, it's like, oh yeah, great idea, and you're like, say back to you, like, yeah, it's a great idea, right? You don't have healthy exchanges like that. That's not. Those aren't friends. Those aren't your friends. If you're gonna say something, shit. About. So you have people like that, right? So you have. I won't say that they don't care about what people think of them in an absolute sense, but you definitely have people who have much thicker skin than others. That's an excellent question. So now, how do I determine what's backbiting to the person in front of me? How do I do that? That's it. You have to develop a relationship. And remember, all of this entire discussion, what have we been talking about? Like, the most important fundamental thing that we can do with anyone is develop a relationship with them. And it's through that relationship that I learn about that person. I learn his likes, I learn his dislikes, I learn what makes him angry, what makes him happy. All of these things, we start learning those boundaries of each other. And when I learn that person's boundaries and I spend time with them, I should intrinsically know what this person likes, what I say behind his back, and what he dislikes, what I say behind his back. That's really important, because that in developing that awareness and developing that relationship. So That's one aspect of it. Intention's another aspect of it. And I think Abdul Razak, he alluded to this, but basically the cultural norms, right? So the culture helps dictate some of these things. There are certain words in English that are used a certain way that have a negative connotation. And there are certain words that are used in a negative connotation, even though they, in and of themselves, they might not have a particular meaning. Yeah. So if, for example, you're watching one of your friends play basketball and he shoots, he's like, oh man, he's cold. Different connotations for different cultures, right? Cold can mean that, you know, he keeps missing. Cold can mean he's an amazing shooter, right? It depends. People come from different cultures, people come from different backgrounds, but this is the effect of culture on those terms and on those terminologies. So it's important that culture play a role in how we express certain things and understanding where people come from, because people come from different places, right? We all don't come from the same place. We all use different terms, we all use different words, and we need to make sure that when we express things to the people in front of us, that we are understood. This doesn't mean that you can't speak colloquially, right? That's not the point, that's not the purpose. But it's important to understand that sometimes if I use colloquial terms or I use terms that are unique to a particular region, a particular place, then it becomes problematic to really understand that person. I've really dealt with this I have some friends from like Philadelphia, and they think that their terminology is like universal that's used throughout the US. And I'll be like, yeah, nobody talks like that, bro. Like, and they're like, nah. And they're like, wait, yeah, y'all don't say that? It's like, no, we don't say that. We don't talk like that. So you do have those pockets, but in general, it's important to make sure that everything that we say is understood, even though not everything will be understood. Different people. When you talk about an individual's father, the Prophet ﷺ, what did he say about cursing? He said, don't curse your parents. He said, don't curse your parents. So the companions, they said, how is it possible that anybody would curse their parents? So what did the Prophet ﷺ say? If you insult someone else's parents, as a reaction, they will insult yours. So don't do that. Here, talking about an individual's job. So sometimes if people have a particular job, we look at those jobs as menial, right? We look at those jobs as lowly. Even sometimes as a society, we expect everyone to get a degree. We expect everyone to excel academically. Is it everybody's role to go to college? No, it's not, right? If not everybody needs to go that way. It's like, I know like all the immigrant parents are like, oh my God, right? But it's important to understand that we need people to fill every sector of society, right? There are always going to be services that are going to be provided by different people, and it's important that we have people in each of those sectors. Otherwise, we won't have people giving and providing those services. And what's interesting is that when you don't have people providing those services, the ones who are, what happens? They start getting more money, right? Because there's fewer, there's supply and demand. And any dislike description. And like we said, the person who is on the receiving end of this is the one that determines what is disliked or what is not. Manners, even talking about people in this way, saying they're ill-mannered, cheap, or arrogant, right? That person's a show-off. And this is probably the category that most of us fall into. Like when we dislike someone or when we're talking about someone, we'll say things about them like this, right? That this person's a show-off, or that he's arrogant, or that he's ill-mannered. And these are things that we really need to be aware of, because it's a very slippery slope. We think that we're mentioning these things because we want to help that person, or we want to point out the shortcomings in that person so that there are means for bettering them. And we end up just fooling ourselves. These are a lot of religious descriptions here of how we deal with and how we talk about people. Thinking, again, we use the religious gown, right? So we have this thing called spiritual abuse, which is real. And what happens is we put on this religious gown thinking that we can hide behind religion now to describe others. And this is something that's completely inappropriate. It's something that's completely unacceptable, regardless of how they are and who they are. But there might be people if I said, for example, all mechanics are thieves, am I backbiting? Mechanics, all inspectors, all VA state inspectors are thieves, right? So as long as I'm not specifying, and we'll talk about some of the places where generalities can apply, right? So there are certain cases when I'm general, but it's clear from my speech that I'm intending a particular person, like right now. Worldly actions, even this. Even this, we talk about how people spend their time, or how people go about, or how people do business, or how people carry themselves. It's none of my business. Like there's no reason for me to talk about that. Yes. Okay. You really want to talk about someone? No. Okay. Alhamdulillah. So clothing, talking about people's clothing, and this is something that's really dangerous. This is something that's really problematic too. And sometimes we think that if I do see somebody with these characteristics, if I really believe that a person has these things, if I believe a person is a thief or a liar, drinks alcohol, or I believe that he doesn't take care of himself, or that he doesn't dress well, or he doesn't walk well, what should I do? I talk to them, right? I talk to that person directly. And we talked about the steps of giving advice. And we said the first step in giving advice is what? Developing a relationship. Because the thing is, there are many times we don't know this person's situation. Like we don't know what's going on with them. And we're very quick to judge. We're very quick to talk about them. We're very quick to judge. And it's important that we develop that relationship before we go and we start making these judgments. Because many times these are our own perceptions. Right? Just because we see somebody doing something, it doesn't mean that that is the reality. That is just our perception. So how can backbiting apply to religious issues? So remember we said that, calling an individual a liar or a thief, like these are things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited. And if I'm saying this about someone, why is that a problem? Or why is that an issue? Because even the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there were people who he exposed. There are people that he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he actually spoke about, saying that this is a lie, this is backbiting, this is stealing, etc. I don't think, no, stealing, no. But this is a lie, this is backbiting. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's established that he actually said this about people. So if he sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this, how come it's not okay for us to do it? Okay. We don't have access to what? Okay, so maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired him. Absolutely. That's a very strong possibility. What else? Yeah. Okay. Like we know for sure the Prophet had a pure intention. Yes. Ahsan. Right. In very summarily, that's the reason. That it was a teaching moment. The Prophet there is a principle in Islam that says لا يجوز تأخير البيان عن وقت الحاجة. That it is not permissible to delay information about something when there is a need for it. And every time the Prophet ﷺ saw something impermissible, he had to what? He was obligated to say something about it. Why? Because he was the one who carried the Sharia. He was the one who carried the religion. He couldn't look out for the individual situations and individual needs. That wasn't his job. His job was to bring the Sharia and tell the people that this is right and that this is wrong. Otherwise it would be a tacit approval, because just imagine if he let people go. And we got this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he allowed someone to drink alcohol, or he sallallahu alaihi wasallam allowed someone to backbite, or he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this happened in front of him, then this is something that would actually be inherited, which is why it's important for the Prophet ﷺ to point things out immediately. Yes?
Question then, I'm assuming you said this is the exception to the Prophet
Mhm.
That means that we're not allowed to do other things, or like, how would we like follow the sunnah and whatnot?
So in regards to this, it's a good question. So here, what can I benefit now? If I have these few hadith that the Prophet ﷺ is pointing out somebody's lying or pointing out somebody's backbiting, what can I do with that information as an observer? Okay, how do I apply it? Hold on. Okay, so I would learn characteristics. You're going to add something? Sure. So is there any Muslim that is prohibited from giving advice to another Muslim? No, absolutely not. The only thing that we had talked about previously is what is the most appropriate way to give advice. And we said step one is building a relationship with the person. So over here, we learned the characteristics of lying. We learned the characteristics of cheating. We learned the characteristics of backbiting, right? That's what we practically benefit from this, huh, David?
Yeah.
That's what we practically take away from it. Not on how to respond to it, right? That's because that's not the lesson. The lesson is in recognition. So even if what we say is true, we said that that is backbiting because and if it's a lie, it's what? It's slander. So it's not like, okay, one is, no, they're all bad, right? There's no, unfortunately, or fortunately, alhamdulillah, there's no good way out of this particular situation. So mentioning what he dislikes, we said that this is the baseline. This is how it is defined. This is how it is dealt with. And we said that if it's untrue, that this is something that is considered slandered. Al-Hasan, and this is Al-Hasan al-Basri, he said that mentioning others falls into three categories: backbiting, slander, or defamation. All of these are mentioned in Allah's book. Backbiting is mentioning something true about him. Slander is mentioning something untrue. Defamation is relaying what you heard, right? So none of these are good. Being involved in backbiting in any way, shape, or form is going to lead down a bad path. Yes.
Is something true or
No, it's just relaying it. So, but when ifk is mentioned in the Quran, it's talking about something that it was an event that was actually untrue. So Ibn Sirin once mentioned a man and said that black man, when he pointed him out, he said that black man. He then said, I seek Allah's forgiveness. I see myself as having backbitten him. Okay, why do you guys think that he said this or did this? Okay, yeah, he didn't have to specify his color, sure.
There was no need for that.
No, it was extra information that was not needed. Why else?
It might be like he was doing it like, I don't know, maybe like when he said that we're like kind of racist.
Okay.
He meant saying it like disparaging.
Yeah. Okay. تفضل شيخ محمود. عندك شيء؟ نعم. تفضل. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to speak up. Did he know the name? Wallahu alam. I don't think so. Otherwise, he would have mentioned him by name. And Allah knows best, right? So when we look at the scholars and we look at statements like this, there are multiple ways to understand it. One of those ways is that, and this is what I feel. I could be wrong, that he didn't intend to backbite the person. But is there a possibility that the person who was on the receiving end could have taken it as backbiting? So what did he do? Right? He asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness, even though he himself might not have felt he was wrong, or that he felt something was wrong. But because of the possibility he might have hurt the person in front of him, and look at this, because of the possibility that existed that he might have hurt him, he sought forgiveness for what he said. The next narration, Ibn Sirin once mentioned Ibrahim al-Nakhai, instead of saying that the one who is lame in one eye, he used his hand to cover his eye. Why? Why do that? So when people said, when he would say Ibrahim, they would say who? And he would go like this. I'm sorry? I don't know. Okay.
Information needed.
Sure, I agree with you, but I'm saying, is one better than the other? He's saying no. Yes. Okay. Yeah, you're not defining him by that. Yeah. Okay. Yes. That it's the lesser of two evils, possibly. What else? Or anything else? No, he was lame, so he might have had a lazy eye. Yeah. Ibn Sirin is a scholar of the past. So all of these are they're major students of companions. Ibrahim Nakhai, very famously a student of Ibn Mas'ud, even though he never met him. But anyway, that's a different discussion. Coming for you, Abdul. Yeah. Yeah, they would be considered tabi'in. So these are very famous scholars from the tabi'in. So over here, and I do agree. I believe it's sometimes saying something is more impactful than making a gesture. And I feel, because remember, there's a cultural context here that we're not aware of, correct? They're in a society that's very different from the society that we live in today. And for them, doing something like this, it wouldn't be considered as, what's the word I'm looking for? as pronounced or as forward as it would be to just to do an ishara or just to do a motion. The next chapter talks about backbiting not being limited to the tongue. And this is basically a discussion of even gestures and such, that these encompassing backbiting as well. I guess we have a little bit of time. So we said backbiting of the tongue is considered impermissible because it is informing and pointing out other shortcomings which he dislikes sharing. Insinuating is equivalent to clearly stating it. Why? You're gonna have to speak up a little bit. Because the same message is being reached, right? Whatever the vehicle is, right? Whatever the vehicle is in getting the message across, whether it be in words or whether it be in motions, the end result is the same. And that you are trying to say and portray a message and give information about a particular individual. Sometimes just winking or alluding, you know what I mean? Like how somebody walks and you just, you know what I mean? You just kind of look over, you know what I mean? You nod or you tell someone to look over at someone. These are all different ways of backbiting. Why? Because and sometimes this is more dangerous, because just to nod like this, I don't even have to say what I need to say. It's like, look at how funny he looks, or look at how strangely she's walking, right? Without me having to use all the words to express that particular idea. So a woman came and left, and after she left, I made a sign with my hand indicating that she was short. The Prophet ﷺ said, you have backbitten her. Who is speaking here? You guys know who this is? It's Aisha. And another hadith, copying someone by limping behind them, which is actually worse than saying it because it's a closer representation of the intended image. Yes? So that's a specific situation. In situations where I am allowed to backbite someone, if there are 100 Ibrahims in the room, right? They'll be like, okay, well, which Ibrahim are you talking about? Right? So, and we will talk about it. And sometimes those things can come across. There's like Ahmed, like which Ahmed? The brother with the big head. Ah, okay. You don't, you know what I mean? Like you don't mean to make fun of him. You just like, you're trying to give a characteristic that is going to single him out of all of the people who you know, who have the shared name. Aisha was speaking to another woman, and the Prophet ﷺ saw them and said, it doesn't please me to speak another, even if I was given a large sum of money. And this is in a positive way, right? It doesn't have to be in a negative way, but just speaking about someone, this is how problematic he ﷺ saw it. Writing is not an excuse, right? It doesn't excuse anyone. Just because I wrote it in a book or just because I put it in a fiction novel, this does not excuse me or it prevent it from being backbiting. In your diary, so if I'm backbiting in a vacuum, is it backbiting? I'm sorry? Right, it's negative thoughts. What's interesting is Ghazāli talking about even backbiting in the heart and the effect that it has. And we'll get to that. We'll talk about it. Yes?
I have a question about like names. So
Yeah.
you say like, I know someone, I have a friend who does X, Y, and Z. You don't mention them or you don't say an action that would obviously incriminate them. Would that be considered backbiting?
As long as it's not obvious. Yes, but well, he mentioned some examples. Yes. Sure. Yeah. So there are exceptional situations to backbiting, and we'll talk about all of those. Like for example, if someone comes to me and they're like, "Hey, what do you think about so and so? I'm thinking about offering my daughter for marriage." So in this situation, and I know something about, if I know this brother has a substance abuse problem, or I know this brother lies, or, you understand what I'm saying? In that situation, I'm now obligated to what? I'm obligated to tell the truth. I'm obligated to backbite. Or if somebody asks me about a business, right? If I go to a restaurant and the food is really bad, and someone says, "Hey, how's the food at that restaurant?" What am I going to tell them? Do I say, "Alhamdulillah," and just kind of keep it? It's like I have to cover my brother's faults. Does that apply? Why? Why doesn't it apply? Okay, it's a business. All right, why are businesses exempt? Okay, huh? Okay, justice. That becomes a bit problematic and subjective. I'm sorry? They could harm something, like the restaurant owner? Like, what'd you say about my gyro? All right, so a Yelper. I know somebody who's very proficient at their Google reviews. But I was gonna say, over here, someone could be harmed if there's food poisoning, right? So let's just assume the food isn't tasty. I don't want to go to the food poisoning route, but I say like this, assume the food isn't tasty. Why is it okay for me to talk about this business? Yes. If I don't share, like here, I could lie, or I don't have to say anything, right? That's also an option. If somebody is just like, oh, how's the food over there? You just be like, alhamdulillah. I didn't say anything about the food. I'm just thanking Allah. Yes. No, I definitely agree, right? That all those things are a possibility, but here I'm saying very specifically, no, it's a pretty sanitary place. Just the food is really bad. Yes. Okay. Okay. So, sure. All right. What if it's a bad plumber? What if he's a terrible plumber or a terrible lawyer?
Talk about this, if it's like business contracts and whatnot,
Sure.
you need to tell the truth because you need to make sure there's like transparency and both parties kind of know what they're getting into.
Okay, that's fine. Like when I'm getting into business with someone, but I'm just talking about buying a pizza with barbecue sauce. Huh? Okay, what kind of negative impact could it have on a person if I don't tell him that the food is bad? I could have a nasty meal. I could waste my money. Here, a plumber or lawyer or a business or all of these things. Where are they working? Are they working privately or are they working publicly? They're working publicly. The moment a public service is offered, then you have a right to be criticized what? Publicly. It's very simple. So why is it okay for me to, go ahead. What service am I offering by sinning publicly? And when I'm sinning, like if I'm sinning publicly, there can be corporal punishment that's associated with it, right? There is for that. Like for example, what is the punishment of somebody who publicly commits zina? Stoning. What is the punishment for the one who privately commits zina? Nothing, right? There's no corporal punishment, right? There's no legal punishment for that. Huh? Yeah, for somebody who's married. So, or I mean, yes, thank you. So I don't even want to talk about it. But I was going to say that when a service is offered publicly, then there's a right to criticize it publicly. This also extends to people who are offering public services, like an imam, right? If he's doing something publicly, he can be criticized publicly. Why? Because he is a public figure. And some people might say, oh, well, you know, what won't it cause this or that? But did anybody force that imam to be a public figure? No, it's a voluntary position, right? He decided to get into the limelight. Yes. There you go. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't just be like, oh yeah, he's ugly. You know what I mean? Like this. It has to be related to the services that are being offered, right? You know, it's like, so for example, oh yeah, no, there's the stuff he's teaching, there's no basis for it, or you know, a lot of the stuff that he shares, it goes against, you know, the traditionalist thought. You know what I mean? Like, though it has to be within the realm of the service that he's offering. Like, so for example, like I can't say about the plumber, like, oh man, he's a terrible mechanic, right? This is not a service that he's offering publicly, right? That He might do those things on the side, you know what I mean? Or even myself, like if you're like, hey, I need help changing your oil, and I come and do it, and there's like transmission fluid in your engine, right? Then you can't be like, oh man, he's a terrible mechanic. You could, I would expect you to advise other people not to have me touch their car, but that, you know what I mean? It has to be within the realm of the services that are provided or services that are offered. Yeah.
So you made a mistake and you said something bad about somebody, you wrote something. Now what do you do?
We'll talk about that, inshallah. No, we'll talk about like, okay, what are the steps of tawbah? Right, because there have to be reasonable means, because the thing is, there's tawbah. What if, do I have access to that person? That's one question. Do I not have access to them? Is that person still living? Right, there are different means and methods to go through that. I mean, sometimes we speak about people and we're like, yeah, I'm gonna ask their forgiveness. Next thing you hear, they move to like Ecuador. Or, you know, next thing you hear is the person passed away, right? And it happens. It's life. We're always going to be dealing with people who move and who pass away. And yes. Oh, how do you receive with being back? How do you deal with being backbitten? I don't remember if it's one of the things, but if we don't, we'll get to it, inshallah, because it is important. So if I don't mention anyone specific, right? This is something that was asked. It's not backbiting, because I haven't specified anyone. That is the condition for something to have being backbitten. And again, it has to be something that's clearly identifiable. You can't be like, oh, you know, yeah, you know, I was talking to Muhammad, and you know, Muhammad did this, and you know, and he was wearing those, you know, those thick glasses, and like, khalas. You know what I mean? Like now I've given a very specific characteristic in which one that I'm speaking about, and that's where it becomes a problem.
You're discussing someone the way they're treating you. Is that backbiting?
Yeah, how?
If you're saying this person treats me this way, it's not
So who are you speaking to?
my mother and my sister.
Okay, so I think there are certain contexts where speaking about someone, it depends on whether the person you're speaking to has the power to do anything about the situation or not, or can offer reasonable advice to help you out of that situation. Sometimes I have people come into my office and they're like, you know, Sheikh, you know, don't tell anyone. I was like, no, I'm about to give a khutbah, like about your specific issue. But because there are certain places where confidentiality is important, right? And otherwise you lose trust. What are some of those places that in society, where do I need to maintain confidentiality? Like if I was an electrician and someone's like, hey, did you work on someone's house? I'd be like, no, I didn't work on that house, and I didn't do any wiring, right? But there are certain spaces where it has to be maintained. Like what? Yeah. I'm sorry? Social services, absolutely. Healthcare, good.
Like in terms of like war, like you have like secret plans, you might not want to.
Sure, I mean, that is usually called treason, right?
Yeah, I'm saying like spy or.
You don't want to be treasonous. I agree. Yes. Financial sector. You start drawing a little bit of a line when it comes to finances. Tax consultants, sure. Right, because that's your relationship with the government versus. So now, a lot of business dealings they can be very public. It's just a matter of going back and following and seeing where those public dealings are happening. But legal issues, right? Legal issues have to stay private. And another place, and this is one a lot of people don't talk about, when people come and talk to the Imam, right? Because he's a spiritual counselor, and that is supposed to stay private. And one of the problems is that if he starts sharing the information, or she as a spiritual counselor starts sharing information with the community, what happens? Right, destroys the trust. Nobody will come and see you. Nobody's going to come back and see you or talk to you because they'll be like, yeah, he's got a big mouth. So it's important to maintain these things. So these are all general statements, but they can apply to specific situations because you already know who the intended party is. It's like, yeah, you know, and he just passed by us like 5 minutes ago. It's like it's a general statement, and there might have been a few people, but it's clear who's intended by those statements. Because again, the purpose of backbiting is specifying the person to point out a particular deficiency in that person. So the Prophet ﷺ, if he disliked a particular characteristic that he saw in someone, what he would do, he says, what's the matter with people that say such and such? And he would keep it really general. He would keep it really general. And it's not something, there would be a delay in when he said it. right? So it's not like he would hear someone say something like, silly, and then go run to the member. And otherwise, it becomes very clear that how to identify those people. And if he intended to advise them, what would happen? So there are 3 people who came to him and they didn't find him. And what did they say? And then the Prophet ﷺ spoke about them on the member. You guys remember? He'll continuously fast, will not marry, and pray all night. So the Prophet ﷺ, he went to the member and he said, where are those people who came and visited today with the questions? Why? Because he wanted to advise them and tell everyone, I don't do these things. These aren't things that I do. And again, because it was a teaching moment for him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what's the worst type of backbiting? What do you guys think? All right, slandering is a different category. Yeah. So I think Ghazāli had it out for some of the clergy at his time, because he's pretty, he goes in pretty harsh in this section. He says it's the Qur'an, the reciters of the Quran. And I'll talk about some examples of why he mentions that and why he talks about it. And he says when they do it, they actually present a false sense of piety. No offense, Sheikh Mahmoud. And he says here also, such individuals are ignorant because they've combined 2 evils. They've combined showing off and backbiting. And why is that? He gives some examples. He says when people are mentioned in front of them, they'll say things like, Alhamdulillah that we haven't been tested by having to meet the Sultan, working for our destruction or working toward our destruction. What do you guys think is going on here? What does he actually feel? It sounds like a little jealous to me. He didn't get the opportunity to go and meet this political leader. So what does he say about the people who go and meet them? I seek refuge from the lack of modesty. May Allah protect us from being like that. When they see somebody who is not dressed appropriately to them. Also, this false praise that happens. He says, how wonderful the state of so-and-so. He had no shortcomings in his worship, but he was tainted with unfriendliness. Right? You see what he did here? He was praising him, and all of a sudden he's like, just that low shot. He said, tested with what we are all tested with, which is a lack of patience. Right? It's just an underhanded way of talking about people or talking about someone. And he intends to belittle this person. Right? That's his intention, is actually to belittle this person. And when we belittle someone, why do we do it? Because we want to bring ourselves up, right? Because we want to bring ourselves up. May Allah protect us. So he says that this person who does that, he actually falls prey to 3 evils. So we know 2 of them. What are the 2? Backbiting and showing off. What's the 3rd? Self-praise. Right? Even though it's not something he's open with it, right? But he's actually praising himself. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Why? What happens? What is the harm in me praising myself? All right, it feeds the ego. Right? It feeds the ego. So that there's a difference between presenting your skill set and praising yourself. Yes.
Also, I would say for people who don't say enough about themselves, teaching moments for students that put themselves down.
So both of these are problematic, right? Praising yourself and putting yourself down. These are both extremely problematic. If there's a characteristic I don't like about myself, if I feel I'm cheap, what should I do? I give more money. If I feel I'm a coward, what should I do? Put myself in situations where I can overcome those fears. And we had talked about this much earlier, right? We had talked about this much earlier on how do you face and deal with those characteristics that we don't like about ourselves? Even our physical characteristics, there are a couple things to keep in mind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا أَحْسَنَ تَقْوِيمًا, that we have made you in your best form. That it is not how we are right now. This is the best possible way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have created. And that's important to keep in mind. And even in that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us room to like adjust that too. If I don't like my weight or I don't like my physique, what can I do? I can exercise, I can diet, I can work. Allah has given us control over our characteristics, our character, and many times we can even adjust our physical characteristics. And the things that are immutable, the things I can't change, how should I view those? Even that can change, but this isn't going to change. It's my perspective that's going to change. So all of this can change. And it's amazing. Wallah, it's amazing. It's amazing how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to change every aspect of ourselves. And even the physical one, all it is just a matter of mindset. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us in the best possible way we could be. So yes, no negative talk about ourselves.
About you.
Yeah. So Ghazāli, he still considers them ignorant. He talks about reciters. So what problem is there here? Why is he talking about them? Okay, maybe there was an issue with Qur'an during his time, possibly. What else? Huh? Kalamullah. What about it? I agree, it is. Yes. Oh, okay. Yes. They're expected to, like, held at a higher standard. All right, what here okay, this is a very good point. As a qari or as a hafid, in general, automatically people assume what? You're knowledgeable. Awesome. Automatically, when you're a hafid, people assume you're knowledgeable, even though you might not have formally studied Islamic sciences. And this becomes a very dangerous position. Because the person has the hifz, but they don't have the knowledge that's associated with it. So when they say things and they do things, who does it reflect on? Not on the layman. It reflects on who? It reflects on the clergy. It reflects on the scholarly class. So the more reciters do these bad things, people automatically assume that all clergy is bad. And this breaks the relationship between the lay Muslim and the clergy, so that they no longer trust them, they no longer trust their knowledge, they no longer trust their fatwa. So Shaitan still laughs and toys with them because in addition to this, they have a false sense of security. What is that false sense of security? Being a hafid, right? The fact that a person is hafid, all of a sudden, and I've seen this in many communities, I'm sure you guys have witnessed it too. The way to protect my child is to what? Make him hafid. And there are, I'm hoping, and like for anybody watching or who is involved in any type of research like this, I'm curious about two things. Number one, the percentage of kids that actually graduate hifz programs. I'd be interested to know that, because I can't imagine it being particularly high. And second one, what happens to these kids after they finish the hifz programs? In terms of how many are actually able to maintain it and what they go on to do in their worldly life. And I think these are very important questions that we as a community really need to address and discuss and talk about. So these individuals, again, they worship without knowledge. And because they have this appearance of knowledge, it creates this false sense of security, which allows them to fall into things which are far more dangerous. Like, what if I'm the listener? What if I'm just I'm not on the receiving end, but I hear somebody else backbiting? So somebody is talking to me about a third party. You guys understand the scenario? Right, so Nazim is talking to me about David. Okay, so fear Allah. Or no, Sheikh Mahmoud is talking to no. So I should do my best to point out the conversation is not appropriate. Right? This is what I'm supposed to do. And there are different techniques and different methods to this. Inshallah, we'll talk more about this next week. I look forward to seeing all of you next week. The time doesn't change this weekend, right? Does the time change this week or next week? I think it changes next week.
Wait, what? We're already there?
Yeah. The 13th? Okay, oh, so there's still time. I'll see all of you guys next week, inshallah. Also, I have 2 favors to ask from you. Number 1, the chair that you are sitting on, if you could just please go ahead and take it in the lecture hall. Secondly, we're trying to promote the class. So if you guys could please just talk to Ramsha. There's a couple questions she wants to ask, and she's going to post it up on social media. Just testimonials of why you come to the class, why you enjoy it. I would really appreciate it if you guys did that, because we're trying to encourage more youth and more involvement with this class. So jazakumullah khair. Allahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam. الله يبارك فيك. ها